So I think we'll go ahead and get started. It looks like we've got a smaller group today, which is perfectly okay. We will get started. Most of what we're going to cover today is best practices, tips that were shared with us from other departments, information that through conversations that we've had with other departments, we've deemed is beneficial to everybody who might be listening or on the session today. So a lot of what you're going to hear today is driven by your peers who are also hiring students. So we can get right into some of that. The purpose for today's discussion is basically just to talk about the online hire tool, some tips, some best practices, some things we've seen over the past couple weeks, and how your peers are using it. Most of you probably know us by now. We are your student employment team. You can call any one of us with any questions or send them to the general student employment email address. It's most often best to send your inquiries to that student employment email address because we all monitor that. So if one of us is out of the office, you know you're still going to get an answer because the questions are going to be sent to the appropriate people. And we do just want to take a second and thank our interpreters today for providing us their service. So thank you very much for joining us today. So for those who may not yet have access to the online hire tool, if you're newer, if it's not something that you do every day, you can self-request access to the online hire tool through Oracle. It's a couple step process. Click on preferences, click on access request, and then you're going to click on request access. So access request, request access, and then student hire request should come up. That request will go to your direct supervisor for approval, and once approved, you'll have access to that. Just as a note, the RSC does not manage approval for the online hire tool. That is all done through Oracle and through direct access requests. So if you need access, go through Oracle, request that access, and you should generally get it pretty quickly. As long as your supervisor is in their emails and sees it come through. Real quick, we did want to touch again on W-2s because they are now available in case anybody has gotten questions from your student employees about when are they getting them, where to get them. W-2s have been mailed out. They were mailed to the student's home address. So it's not going to come to their dorm room. It'll go to their home address. That's where they'll get it. Or they can go online and they can access their W-2 electronically. This information is directly from the payroll website. You can go to payroll, provide this information to your student employees. The step-by-step process is the same for faculty, staff, and student employees. So you can provide this information to them. When they contact us, we are just linking them back to this information. So if they come to you, you can save that step of redirecting them somewhere else and just provide this information directly to them. But W-2s are out and students can access them directly electronically. Just a note about international students and taxes. We cannot legally provide tax guidance to any employee, and specifically, we really can't provide tax guidance to international students. We can't suggest how they should fill out their W-4, what deductions they should take, etc. All of those questions should be referred to a tax professional. For our international students, International Student Services does have tax professionals available who can specifically assist them in filing their taxes due to the complexities of their filing because they are an international student. So if an international student comes to you and says, I don't know what to do, please don't direct them to something like TurboTax or H&R Block. Send them over to ISS, and ISS has direct links for them for filing their taxes. There are specific programs that they have to use. There's specific information that they have to have. And ISS has a better handle on that than really anybody else here on campus. So direct them right to ISS, and ISS will help them along, provide them some resources and get them on their way to filing their taxes. So just a couple notes, as we've been going through the online tool. As a reminder, currently the online tool can only be used for hiring into new roles. It can't be used for terminations. It can't be used for wage changes. It's only if you're hiring a student into a new role or rehiring them into a job that has terminated, has already passed and closed out. That's currently where we're at with this system. We haven't moved any further. There at right now are no plans to add any new functions such as processing wage changes or account changes or terminations. We're really right now just at that hiring piece of it. Um, if your student is a brand new employee, never worked for RIT before, and you've gone through that process of putting their university ID in and triggering that new hire packet to your students, you will receive an email directly once that student completes part 2 of their I-9 and they are clear to start working. That email will come to you the day after that student has completed their appointment in our office. It's not instantaneous. There is a little bit of a delay because we're dealing with 2 different systems. We're dealing with Equifax, who manages the actual I-9 piece of it, and then we're dealing with Oracle, which manages the hiring piece of it. And so when a student completes the I-9, that's done in Equifax, and we have to wait for that information to be sent to RIT, to Oracle, in a feed that happens overnight. So it's not instantaneous. If the student comes today and completes their I-9, tomorrow morning, you'll receive an email that says, your student so-and-so has successfully completed the I-9. You may now go to this website, student hire at rit.edu, and process that hire. When you receive that email, you should know that that I-9 is done and it was done yesterday. So the feed is set up, it's done every day. So if the student does the I-9 today, you get the email tomorrow. You cannot use a start date prior to today. The system will error. So if Sally's student comes today and finishes their I-9, you get that email tomorrow saying, hey, Sally's student finished their I-9, please complete the hire process. And you enter a date of yesterday, it is going to error. And then I'm going to have to reach out to you and say, hey, I-9 was done on February 7th. You entered February 6th as a start date. Is that accurate? So always just keep in mind when you see that email, the I-9 was done yesterday. You can use yesterday forward as the start date, but you can't go any farther back than the date that the I-9 was done. And as a reminder, the online hiring tool is now the only way that your brand new student employee can receive access to the I-9. Part 1 of the I-9 is part of the new hire packet that is triggered by the hiring tool. When you put their ID in and then you get to the point where it says, your student will receive the information in their email to complete all of the necessary next steps. That is the only way they can get the I-9. So please do not instruct the student to email us asking for an I-9. Please do not instruct them to, just go online and schedule an appointment. They have to wait to get that new hire packet, which needs to be triggered by the hiring department. So as a reminder, students will always appear in your Chronos on the date you entered as the hire date, as long as payroll is not currently running. So if you enter a student today with a hire date of February 9th, they're not going to show up until February 9th. If payroll is running, just keep in mind that Chronos will not perform an update until payroll has fully completed processing that pay cycle. Generally, they're completed sometime on Tuesday after the end of the pay period, but in some cases where there are some issues, things are going on, such as this past pay period, it was delayed by a day and we didn't get access back to the system until Wednesday, and Kronos didn't update until after that. So just a reminder, at the end of the pay period, there is a bit of a lag while payroll is processing the cycle, and Kronos will not update. It doesn't mean your student can't start working. It just means that you will need to keep track of the student's hours, and then you can manually enter them once they appear in Kronos. If you have hired somebody and you expect them to be in Kronos and they're not, and the payroll has finished processing, it's now, let's say, Thursday after the end of payroll, and you still don't see the student, reach out to us so we can start doing some troubleshooting, because there's no reason that a student should take more than 48 hours to upload into your system. If you're not seeing them, please don't wait till the end of the pay period, because once we get to the end of the pay period, there may be a situation where we can't do anything because we've timed out. So as soon as you don't see them, as long as payroll is done running, reach out to us so we can start doing some troubleshooting and get them on your list. The online tool is intended to use actual start dates, not pay period start dates. So if your student is starting today, you can use today as a start date. This actually has been put in place so with that I-9 completion date and going forward with exact start dates, we're much more in compliance with our pay practices. But just remember, when you're using the online tool, you can use the actual start date. Especially important if a student completes an I-9 today and you go and put the start date for this current pay period, which was January 26th, you're probably going to get an email from me saying, hey, when did this student actually start? Because January 26th is quite a bit past, and the student just did the I-9 today. Popping back up to the second bullet, because I skipped it. If you make a mistake in your hiring, contact us as soon as you realize it so that we can provide the best path forward to correct the mistake. It may require you sending a hire form to us to correct something if you put in an inaccurate start date, possibly a change form if we're already into the pay cycle and the student's been working for a few days. So really it's a situation specific answer to whatever is going to be required to correct that mistake. But if you realize that you've made a mistake, reach out to us immediately so that we can take a look and determine the best path forward. Whoops. And lastly, students cannot begin working until you receive that communication that the I-9 is complete. So do not allow a student to begin working until you receive that email. It says, so-and-so has completed their I-9. Please go to studenthire.rit.edu to process the hire. Again, you only get that email the day after the I-9 is actually completed. So allowing a student to start working before you receive that email can put us in a compliance situation. Late paperwork. We had a lot of issues this past payroll cycle with paperwork coming in pretty late and putting us in a position where we actually could not process quite a bit of it, which means those students did not get paid for last pay period. They're going to get paid all of their past due hours in the next pay cycle, which is definitely a compliance issue, and if found on audit could lead us to, some fines. But we do have cutoff times that if you get us this paperwork or you get the submissions in by that time, we can guarantee that they're going to get in the system. For the manual processes, which are the forms that are sent to SEO submit forms at rit.edu, we have a noon cutoff time on that Thursday. The reason for that is because, again, it is a very manual process and we need that afternoon to get all of those hires in and make sure that they're in the system for you to be able to sign off the next day. For the online hiring tool, that cutoff is 4 o'clock. Um, those those hires that are put in through the tool, some of them still need to be reviewed by us if they have situations where it's causing them to go into our pending list. And we need to be able to have the time to actually look into those. And not only to look into them, but if necessary, to reach out to you and ask questions so we can make sure that we get those in properly. So if we've reached the end of the day and you've left for the day and we've left for the day and we have something come in late, that student is not going to be able to get into the system in time and is going to miss out on a paycheck. Now, obviously, they're going to get paid at a later date, but they're not going to get that paycheck on the day that they're expecting that paycheck. So really keep in mind those cutoff times. We do that so that we all have enough time to get in there and make sure that if it's supposed to be in for this pay period, we can accurately get it in for this pay period. Once we get past the end of the day on pay period ending Thursday, our hands are tied. We are completely restricted. Everything from that point on becomes very manual. So it means, manually entering of hire forms if we can even get in there and do it. It means manually entering of hours, potentially with paper payroll change forms that you as a hiring supervisor need to submit, and then manual entering of those hours by the payroll office into Kronos. So now by missing this cutoff time, we've created very manual processes for all three of these offices, which could delay the start of the payroll processing. It creates a lot of extra work that we need to avoid in order to make sure we can keep the processes running smoothly. Anything received after these cutoffs, we do hold until payroll has completed their processing cycle. And then it's your responsibility to submit any past due hours for payment to the student. Just remember that, these student employees, they may be relying on this money for whether it's rent or food or, paying their car payment, buying their books. If they started within this pay period and then don't get hired properly and their pay gets delayed by 2 weeks, for you and I, that might not seem like a big deal. But for a student employee who's relying on this money, it could really be a big deal for them. Um, and I will tell you, we have had parents contact our office upset that maybe their student missed a paycheck, even though they're going to get that pay in the next paycheck. That 2 week wait when they were expecting their pay can be a very big deal for them. So into some of the best practices. So as I said, some of these were sent to us ahead of time from other supervisors on campus that are using the system, or some of just what they like to do within their department. Some of these were derived from conversations that we have had with some of the supervisors campus-wide. So we'll just go through these. I made a handy binder for my student workers that is full of info such as how to use sick time and break frequency. So this is really a great best practice. This binder in this department is kept right at their front desk. And if there's ever any questions and the student can't immediately reach their supervisor or someone else within the department, then they can go right to this binder and locate, break frequency. When should I be taking a break? What can I use my sick time for? What can I use my sick time for? What happens if I need to cover a shift or I can't come in? So all of that information is in a handy dandy binder right at the front desk that the students have access to. It's also a great place to put any training materials or quick using tools for a student who might need it for, programs that they're working on or things like that, cheat sheets. So that was a great tip that was sent to us. Leadership support. So this is really an important tip. Student employment is not easy. We know that. Hiring students, managing students, and just creating a program within your department that operates and functions properly, it's not easy. And it's not easy for one person to handle. But there are some departments out there that have really elevated student employment to their leadership and gotten their leadership support in the importance of following the rules, following the laws. When can a student start working? When do they have to stop? Who can hire students? So it, student employees are employees of the university, and as such, we have to follow all of the employment laws and regulations and whatnot. And so the departments that have their leadership top-down support are the departments that have fewer violations, um, fewer students starting before the I-9 has been completed. They have very firm step-by-step practices within their department of who can hire, when can your student start working, and what happens if your student starts working before you hear from the person responsible for actually processing the hire. What are the repercussions to that within the department? So it's important to get your leadership involved, and those departments that have their leadership involved really have a successful program going within their department. Creating a spreadsheet for hiring. So this is something that will help you as a hiring manager keep track of who you're hiring, how you're hiring them, what what process you used, whether you submitted it online or submitted it through SEO submit forms, and when you hired them. This is especially important for those departments that are larger and have multiple people processing hires. It would be ideal if you had something like this on a Google Drive where all of your supervisors can access it. We have had a number of instances where more than one supervisor has attempted to submit a hire for the same student with different hire dates. All of those hires go into our pending because they're erroring because we can only hire a student once with one start date on a account number. So if you can create yourself a spreadsheet, then you have something to reference. That way, especially if you contact us and say, "Hey, I sent you a hire, where is it?" If you can tell me how you sent it to me, whether SEO submit forms or online, I can locate that information much quicker. If all you send me is, "Hey, I hired this student, where are they?" Then I have to go through all of our systems and figure out, okay, did it come through email? Did it come through online? Where is it? When was it sent in? It just makes it a little bit easier to locate the hire and figure out what the next steps are. It also gives you something to track your hires for. That way, if you submitted a hire on Friday, the first day of a pay period, payroll is running, and then you on Wednesday still haven't seen your student show up in Chronos, you can go back to your spreadsheet and say, okay, I submitted on Friday. If I don't see them by Thursday, I'm going to call Rachel and find out what's going on. It's just it's a bit of information that helps you keep track of your hiring. For international students, it's going to be a good practice to get into asking every international student if they've applied for their SSN. Now that we no longer operate with manual hire forms as a regular practice, if you're submitting their hire online, but they have not yet applied for an SSN, you're still going to have to provide them that hard copy of a hire form. And that is a requirement of the Social Security Administration. That is not our requirement. They have to take that hard copy paper with them. So if you just get into the practice when you're hiring your student of saying, hey, do you need to apply for an SSN? Do I need to give you a copy of your hire form? Then then that student can get the process started, can avoid the risk of being terminated for not applying for the SSN, and we can move forward. But if you can get into that practice of just asking, it helps keep the process moving forward, and then you can just give them their hire form right then and there. So the online verification requests that we have on our website for students, that is still in practice, that is still being used. Preferably, I say preferably, but really it's most targeted now towards returning students. We are required to verify every single semester that a student continues to be registered full-time and has an I-9 on file. Um, so the only way to do that is by them sending us that the request through the website, and then we respond via email. So if you have students who are returning to you each semester, encourage them to start that verification process as soon as they've registered for classes for the next semester. We can verify as soon as they get in SIS and have their classes all set, we can go ahead and start the verification process. The sooner that they do it, the sooner they can send it to you, the sooner you know that they're going to be good to go next semester, and then you don't need to worry about it come next semester. Um, the other thing too is to read it carefully, because we do note on the verification email that we send out which terms we verified. So, fall 2023-24, spring 2023-24, we verify those specific semesters. This is really important for like fall semester when students start registering for spring and they send us their request for eligibility and say it's October. We're verifying everything. We don't know if they're asking for eligibility for a job they're starting now in October or a job they're starting in January. So we're just going to verify everything that we can right at that time when they send us their request. So read it carefully. The other piece of information we are including on that is for international students when their I-20 expires. So if you get a verification and an I-20 is expiring December 23rd, and you are hiring a student for January, they're going to have to get us their updated information, and we're not going to be able to verify that they're eligible to work in January. So we provide that information to the student. They may not read it very carefully. So when you get it, just give it a good once over, make sure all the information on there makes sense. And so now we're going to move into the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Great questions that came in. Sometimes I reach out and I answer questions right away, but I felt like all of these questions that came in were important to share with everybody. So I didn't want to skip over any of these. So first question, can a student still work if they're also working a co-op? Great question. The answer to that is it depends. It depends on a lot of factors. So first, if the student is working a co-op for a company outside of RIT, so they're working for somebody else 40 hours a week, then they can also work for RIT for up to 20 hours per week. So that is a situation where, yes, they can. If a student is working their co-op for RIT and it is a 40-hour-a-week co-op for RIT, then no, because they cannot exceed 40 hours per week while they're working for RIT. That would put them into overtime, and that's a whole different situation. Lastly, if a student is working a co-op for RIT, but it's less than 40 hours a week, then they can work an additional job for whatever the difference is in the hours that they're working for their co-op and 40 hours. So if they're working 35 a week for a co-op here at RIT, they can work an additional 5 hours a week in another job, but they can't exceed 40 hours a week. So what happens if a student is working 2 jobs and they go over 40 hours a week? They obviously are entitled to overtime, which they are paid. The overtime is split between all departments in which they reported hours for. So whether you are the co-op department or the 5-hour-a-week department, that overtime is getting split between the two of you. My understanding is that it is prorated. So the job that has the bigger bunch of hours, the 35-hour-a-week job, would pay a larger chunk of that overtime. And the 5-hour-a-week would pay a smaller chunk. But if you're a department that has said, absolutely not, we cannot have overtime, and suddenly you get hit with, a little bit of overtime because a student went over because they have 2 jobs, now we have a problem. So it's really important to remember that while they can work extra hours, if their co-op is not a full 40, there is that overtime piece that we want to be very cognizant of, because they will get overtime and it will be split between all of the departments. When terminating an employee, do we use the last day of the pay period that they will be working for the effective on date? So terminating an employee has to be terminated on a pay period end date. So if you're sending a change form to us to terminate a student employee, then you have to determine what is the pay period end date of the pay period where the student is working their last shift. So the pay period ends this week on Thursday, the 8th. If a student's last shift was this past Monday, the 5th, you would put that their end date, their effective date is Thursday, the 8th, because that's the last day of the pay period in which the student worked their final shift. This was a great question that I don't have a good answer for you yet, so I'm going to actually funnel it up to some other folks and see what the possibility is. But it says, thank you for the in-progress update. Is there a completed list or report we could reference as well? Right now, all you can see in the online tool is the in-progress information. But I'm going to send this question along and see what we can do about potentially creating a full list. So not only what's in progress, but what you've already submitted, because I can see where there can be some situations where a student hasn't shown up in Chronos, but you want to verify that you actually processed it, maybe because their start date isn't until Monday. But you want to just verify that you actually put it in instead of submitting it twice. So let me send that up and we'll see if maybe I have an answer by the next session. Do MS and PhD GTAs need a Career Connect number for the online hire form? No. That field is in the online hire form, but it's not asterisked, so it's not required. We do have some departments that do put job descriptions in Career Connect just so they have them, and they like to reference them, but it's not a required field. So no, you do not need to put a Career Connect number for those GTAs or for any GA role. Will change forms be available in the online system soon? Right now, the answer to that is no. I don't know what's coming down the pipeline, but I do want to say that everybody received the email a couple weeks ago introducing the new enterprise system that is coming, Workday, and student employment is going to be part of that new enterprise system. So we will probably see some changes over the course of the next 2 years as things are rolling out through Workday. Um, and it may make our online hiring look a little bit different. So I would say right now, with the move towards preparing and starting to implement this new enterprise system, we don't anticipate many more changes to the online hiring tool at this point. So I don't anticipate change forms will be available within the online tool. I'm hopeful that a lot of this stuff will be picked up as we start to launch Workday. With that said, we are familiar with universities both in Rochester and within the Northeast region that are already using Workday for their student employee hiring, and it has been very successful. So this is something that we're very excited about. I'm happy that we've been able to launch an online hiring tool now. And so moving into this next step of implementing a new enterprise system, I think it's really just going to take the employment program to the next level. Um, is it possible to get or pull a list from the system of active student hires or recent actions? So again, this goes back to that question a minute ago. I'm going to forward this on and see what the possibility is of getting some sort of a little bit more robust feature in that search tool. Here's a great question. Can a student be working alone after hours unsupervised? So technically, yes. A student can work at any time of day, unsupervised, in their dorm or wherever. It's from our standpoint, it's acceptable. What you as a department need to determine is if you want to allow that. So you can set ground rules for your students that work has to be done, between this time and this time. It has to be done, you know, here or where, or, in the office or in your dorm or wherever. But you have the ability to set those ground rules. As a note, students who work overnight from midnight to 8 do get shift differential of an extra 75 cents an hour. So if that is something that your budget cannot handle, then you want to make sure you've got ground rules set so that students understand that you cannot work between midnight and 8 a.m. As far as the unsupervised part of it, again, you can set the ground rules. If it is a job that really doesn't require direct supervision and you feel confident that a student can do the job, such as I don't know, answering like social media posts, things like that, then you can allow that to happen. But if you feel like this is a job that you want a supervisor available should your students have questions and need to reach out to somebody, or should they need to escalate something, then set those ground rules that the students can't work outside of, certain hours when there is somebody available for them. So this is a great question, and it's not a clear-cut answer because it really depends on the department and the job, and when that job can be done, when there are staff members available to act as, next level supervisors, et cetera. So you have the ability to set the ground rules. You can say, nope, you can't work outside of these hours. You can say, sure, go ahead, work unsupervised, but make sure that you're consistent in your message to every student. So you can't allow one student to work whenever they want and then request that another student work during specific hours. And make sure that the guidelines are clearly stated to your students so that they know when they can and cannot work. So I've got some questions that came in the Q&A. I just want to touch base real quick since spring break is coming faster than any of us realized probably. Students can work extra hours during spring break. They can work up to 40 hours from March 8th through March 14th. And then 25 hours, March 15th through March 21st. We break it down that way since the week does cover parts of 2 different pay weeks. So we break it down 40 and 25, but your students can work extra hours during that time frame if you need them. Now, as a reminder, many students will go home for spring break, so you want to make sure that you're starting communication with them really now because spring break is only 4 weeks away. Let them know, hey, if you're going home, I need to know by such and such a date so that we can make arrangements within the department to cover your shifts. So we'll get into the Q&A. When we switch away from Oracle, will there be any significant changes to the hiring process? Probably. I can't say for certain what it's going to look like just yet. It's such an infancy stage right now that I can't say exactly what it's going to look like. But I would expect some changes, not just to the student hiring process, but to a lot of things campus-wide. Our office has not had a New York State labor law or minimum wage posting up since I've started here. Is this something that is mandatory for every office? If yes, where can I find this paper to put up in my office? That is a great question. So, did somebody? Okay. Those postings are posted next to every time clock on campus. That is actually managed by the compliance office. They keep those updated. They make sure that those postings are where they need to be. If they need to be changed or edited, they take care of that. So you don't need to have one in your direct office, but know that there is one by the time clock, and that is managed by the compliance office. Great question. Um, the new hiring tool has been great, and the function to see where students are in the hiring process has been extremely helpful. Will there be any way to see all the hiring for a department moving forward? Okay. Um, again, we covered that. We'll see what happens. I assure you I will funnel this up and see if I can get that to expand a little bit so that you can see more. If there are 3 hiring managers, will there be a way to see all the hire paperwork initiated by a coworker? That I'm going to say most likely no. because you have to log into the system under your account. It's not going to allow you to see what somebody else entered under their account. It's account specific. That's why this practice of creating a spreadsheet and keeping it somewhere where everybody can access it can come in really helpful. If you create a Google Doc of some sort where everybody has access to it, so, if there's a question, they can go in there, search by name and say, oh, okay, well, Supervisor B entered this yesterday. I'll hold off on entering it since I see it's already been put in. Are we notified if a student drops their classes before full-time? For example, a student hired for fall semester, if they enroll in March, they request verification, but later drop their classes. Will the supervisor be notified? So the practice of a student dropping their classes happens through SIS, and we are not even notified. Essentially, it doesn't happen until it's almost what's the word I'm looking for? So we get a report at the end of every pay period, and that's when we're notified if a student has dipped below full time. So when they drop classes in SIS, we're not even notified. So it's difficult for us to say, yes, we can notify you because we don't even know. It's actually a manual process where I have to go line by line through payroll and see if any students are under that full-time threshold. What I would really suggest is that you be very candid with your students upon hire and tell them, hey, I'm hiring you. You understand that to be eligible to work, you must be a full-time student. Throughout the course of your employment, if at any time you fall below full-time, you need to come to me immediately, and we need to have a conversation about why and what your next steps are. Making sure that the student understands that upfront, that if they drop below, they have to come and talk to you. That opens that line of communication. They may come talk to you ahead of time and say, hey, I'm struggling in a class and I might need to drop it. What is that going to do to my employment? Rather than going ahead and dropping it and then finding out in the long run that now they're getting dropped from their employment as well because they dropped a class. So open that communication with your student right upon hire, or even each semester as you start your new semester. A lot of our departments will send out a, hey, welcome back for the semester. Here are some items to keep in mind as we go through the next couple months, and then put that as one of your bullet points. If at any time you are going to drop below full time, come talk to us ahead of time so we can determine the best path forward. My boss is asking me about the approval chain. How does that work now that he doesn't sign each form? So that's an interesting question. So the authorized signature on the paper hire form was really something that was for departments to have in their files. So situations where, supervisors were hiring students or a number of students and didn't actually have the approval within their own chain of command to hire students, that was part of the reason that authorized signature was added there, so that there was some sort of way for departments to have a process in place so that somebody was checking to make sure that this supervisor had the approval to hire students. We don't necessarily need that information. That really is department specific. The approval chain is something that you may want to discuss within your department. If you have an account and you have the ability to hire student employees, I'm not sure what that budget approval within your department looks like. From our standpoint, if the account is open and you send a hire form, we're processing it. But really that budget approval piece was for within departments, and specifically those departments who are hiring tons of students, and they really shouldn't have been because they didn't have the authority within their own chain of command. So not a question I can really answer very well, because that chain of approval is something designed within your own hiring echelon. I'm sorry I couldn't provide you a better answer to that. Great questions. There's nothing else in there right this second, but we still have a couple more minutes, so I'm happy to answer anything else. If anybody on my team wants to jump in and add anything, please feel free. Oh, here's another great question. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing this up. Can you talk about the specifics of what kind of remote work will be allowed by students for spring break? So per the spring break or per the remote work policy, students can work remotely for up to 30 calendar days, and then they have to return back to Rochester, back to RIT to continue their work. So students cannot work remotely beyond 30 calendar days. They have to return to Rochester. Spring break is such a short period of time that if a student wants to work remotely, it falls well under that 30 calendar day time frame, and then they'll be returned to Rochester, so they can work remotely. They cannot work outside of the United States, however. They must be within the US to perform their work. So if you have a student who is even just going home to Canada, they can't work remotely because they're outside of the US. I don't anticipate students going much further than that, but they cannot work outside the US. But if they're just going home to Idaho, yep, they can work remotely. Now, with that said, keep in mind as an academic or hiring department, that students might need this time for a break. They may need to take a couple days off just to refresh, rejuvenate, and come back ready to take on the second half of the semester. So if they tell you, yes, I am going home, but I really don't want to work. I want to take this spring break and just sit and veg and do nothing and play Fortnite all, 7 days that I'm home. Let them take that break. It shouldn't be required that they have to work while they're remote, but certainly if they want to work and you have the work for them to do, just make sure, again, you set up the guidelines when they should be sending you their time. Remind them that time has to be reported exact. It can't be rounded. So if that student starts working at 12:07, that time needs to be reported as 12:07, not 12 o'clock. And that they have to have it to you by a certain, the recommendation from our office is that they email you each day when they work with their start and end time. Don't let them wait till the end of the pay period or the end of the week, because if they forget, or they send it to you after you've left for the day, then you're not going to be able to get it in the time card to get them paid. And also make sure they understand if there's any issues or questions, who's available for them to contact with those questions. Great question. Thanks for bringing that up. So I'll go back and ask my team again. Was there anybody that wanted to add anything? Amanda, do you have any trainings coming up that you want to shamelessly plug?
We do have one, February 16th is our next, in the afternoon on Friday. And then I know there's another one after that, but I don't remember when that one is scheduled for, but there are two scheduled and coming up.
Great. And those sessions are called Student Employment 101. You can register for those through Talent Roadmap. They are held via Zoom. Amanda, are they an hour or an hour and a half?
They are just an hour. So just 1 hour. We squeeze everything we can into that hour and hopefully leave time for questions too.
Perfect. Thank you. And those sessions really are geared for newer supervisors, supervisors who are new to the student employment program, new to hiring students, or anybody who is just looking for a refresher, looking for, the most updated information. So you can go ahead and register for that through Talent Roadmap. And Amanda and generally one other person from our office will be there to help present. So I don't see any other questions coming in, and I don't want to hold anybody. It is a smaller group today, so I can understand why the questions are a little lighter today, but the questions that came in ahead of time were wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, we're always looking for questions. We're always looking for suggestions of offices that you'd like to see join us on these sessions to help you better understand how their office supports you as a supervisor in the employment program. So if you have suggestions, please send them our way. We love having guest panelists. It just brings more exposure to how large the employment program really is. Other than that, I would like to again say thank you to our interpreters. Great session again today, and our next session will be on March 13th. And everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.